The courtroom carried an unusual stillness for a Monday morning, the kind of hush that settles when everyone senses trouble on the horizon. The bailiff had barely finished calling the next case when 22-year-old Ethan Caldwell strode in, radiating the sort of confidence that only comes from a life untouched by the word no. His suit looked like it belonged at a gala, not a simple traffic hearing. The gleam of his luxury watch seemed intentionally positioned to catch the light, and the faint, knowing grin on his face suggested he believed his last name could part oceans. Before anyone could give him directions, Ethan stepped forward on his own. He leaned just close enough to Officer Diaz to signal impatience and muttered, "Let's not drag this out. My dad can take care of all this. Here, let me handle it now." With practiced ease, he slid a neat bundle of fresh $100 bills halfway out of his wallet, an offer that clearly wasn't the first of its kind. Before moving forward, hit subscribe to Case Closed and tell me, where are you watching from?
The officer stiffened, the courtroom murmured, and Judge Frank Caprio slowly lifted his glasses. For a moment, Caprio didn't speak. He simply stared at the money in Ethan's hand, then at the officer, then back at Ethan. The silence stretched long enough for Ethan to think he had done something reasonable. Then Judge Caprio set down his pen and delivered the first line that cracked the illusion of superiority. "Mr. Caldwell," he said, voice even but heavy enough to break glass, "this courtroom is not a marketplace. Put the money away." The words struck harder than if Caprio had raised his voice. Ethan blinked, confused, almost offended, as though he couldn't understand why a simple transaction wasn't smoothing the problem. The son of State Senator Thomas Caldwell was not used to pushback, and certainly not from someone he considered a municipal judge beneath his father's influence. "Your Honor," Ethan began with exaggerated patience, "I wasn't offering a bribe. It was just a courtesy. I was in a rush that morning, and I didn't want to hold up the officer with—" Caprio raised a hand, cutting him off. "A courtesy?" he repeated. "Is that the word you want to use?" Ethan swallowed and nodded. Caprio leaned forward. "We will revisit that word shortly." The judge turned to his clerk. "Please read the charges." The clerk stood and read them in the formal tone that made even minor violations feel monumental. Failure to stop at a school zone crosswalk, reckless endangerment, attempted bribery of a public officer, and attempted interference with law enforcement duties. The courtroom shifted again. Ethan's expression flickered, no longer the amused confidence he carried earlier, but something sharper, defensive, irritated. Before proceeding, Caprio glanced directly toward the camera. "Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from, and if you believe justice shouldn't be for sale, subscribe to Mercy's Stories. Today, you're going to witness exactly what happens when someone tries to buy their way out of accountability." The line hung in the air just long enough for Ethan to roll his eyes. Officer Diaz stepped forward when prompted. His voice was calm as he read his incident narrative into the record. He described watching a group of children waiting at a crosswalk outside Elmhurst Elementary School, the crossing guard waving both hands urgently, and Ethan's black luxury sedan rolling through without stopping. He explained how he activated his lights, pulled Ethan over, and approached the vehicle. "I informed the driver he failed to stop at a marked crosswalk during active school hours," Diaz said. He responded, "Officer, I'm late for a campaign meeting. You know who my father is." Then he removed a folded stack of cash from his wallet and said, "Let's not do paperwork. This should cover it." Ethan scoffed loudly, interrupting, "That is not what happened. You're making it sound like I waved cash in his face." Caprio pointed his pen at him. "You will get your turn to speak."
"For now, sit still and listen to the facts." Ethan sank into his chair, jaw tight. Caprio turned back to the officer. "Please continue." Officer Diaz recounted how Ethan attempted to justify his actions by insisting no children were harmed, and in fact, none of them had stepped into the road yet. Diaz clarified that the children had stopped because they were startled by Ethan's car and that the crossing guard had visibly panicked. The words, "startled children," carried a weight that finally made Ethan shift uncomfortably. Caprio tapped his bench lightly. "Mr. Caldwell, did you or did you not offer Officer Diaz money?" Ethan lifted his chin. It wasn't a bribe. It was meant to save time. These fines don't mean anything to my family, so I thought I could— Yes or no, Caprio interrupted. Did you offer him money? Ethan's mouth opened, closed, reopened. He took a breath. I offered compensation for the inconvenience. The judge's voice hardened. That is not what I asked. The moment felt like the room inhaled collectively. Caprio looked down at the paperwork in front of him, then back up at Ethan, as though seeing through the last layer of entitlement he was hiding behind. We are going to examine every minute, every decision, and every excuse you used on that morning, the judge said. And by the time we are done, Mr. Caldwell, the truth will not belong to your father's office, your bank account, or your name. It will belong to the facts. Ethan's confidence flickered for the first time. The script of inherited privilege no longer held, and the courtroom sensed it, the shift from arrogance to the beginning of accountability. The moment where the story stopped being about a senator's son and became about justice itself. Judge Caprio took a slow breath as he flipped the first page of the case file the way he always did, before dismantling a story that didn't match the evidence. Let's walk through the timeline, he said quietly. But the calmness in his tone made Ethan visibly tense. Nothing in Caprio's courtroom was ever quiet by accident. The violation occurred at 8:41 a.m. Officer Diaz made visual contact with your vehicle at the school zone crosswalk, noted the children stepping backward, and initiated the stop at 8:42 a.m. According to dispatch logs, you placed a phone call at 8:44 a.m. to a saved contact labeled Dad's office. Am I correct so far? Ethan shifted. I did make a call, yes, but that doesn't mean— Caprio cut him off with that single raised hand that meant the excuses were over. Good. We'll continue. He looked at his clerk. Miss Rivera, please read the voicemail we received from Senator Caldwell's office later that morning. She selected the file and read the transcript without adjusting her tone, which somehow made it even harsher. This is Dolan calling from Senator Caldwell's office regarding a small matter involving his son. We'd like to handle this quietly before it becomes—
Escalates. Please return this call. When she finished, the courtroom was a vacuum. Ethan froze as though the words had betrayed them personally. I had nothing to do with that, he insisted. My father's staff acts independently. Sometimes they thought they were helping. Caprio rested both hands on the bench. Mr. Caldwell, the call came less than 20 minutes after your traffic stop. The timing is not a coincidence. It's a sequence. Ethan swallowed, visibly flustered. But Caprio was not finished. Officer Diaz, the judge said, did Mr. Caldwell make any other statements at the scene? The officer nodded. Yes, Your Honor. After I declined the money he offered, he said, and this is verbatim, this is how we do it in my father's district. Don't act like this job pays enough to refuse it. Ethan immediately leaned forward. I didn't say that in the way he's making it sound. I was frustrated, not serious. Caprio's expression hardened. Frustration doesn't erase intention, it reveals it. With a nod to the bailiff, the judge requested the body camera audio. A few seconds of static filled the room, and then Ethan's recorded voice emerged, clearer than anything he had just said in person. Come on, man. Don't make this a thing. This covers it. We don't need to do paperwork. This is how we do it in my father's district. The courtroom stirred. There was a sliver of arrogance in Ethan's recorded tone that was unmistakable. The casual entitlement of someone who viewed laws as suggestions and consequences as inconveniences reserved for other people. When the audio concluded, Ethan looked pale. It sounds worse out of context, he muttered. Caprio lifted his pen, tapping it once. Mr. Caldwell, bribery doesn't need context. It only needs an offer. The judge then picked up a sheet that looked slightly older than the others. 1 year ago, he said, holding it up, you received a school zone warning in this same district.
You were advised about the seriousness of pedestrian safety and the role of crosswalk guards." Ethan exhaled loudly. "That was blown out of proportion. I drove a little fast. Nobody was hurt." Caprio leaned forward, eyes narrowed. "Warnings exist so the next time doesn't end in harm. Instead, the next time for you ended in arrogance." Then came the call no one expected. The clerk announced, "Your Honor, the school crossing guard, Ms. Reynolds, is on the phone as a witness." Caprio nodded, and her trembling but resolute voice filled the courtroom. She explained how she had guided children across that crosswalk for 18 years, how she had seen a child clipped by a distracted driver once and never forgot the scream, and how Ethan's car had rolled through with such indifference that she felt the same cold fear rise in her chest. "The kids stepped back," she said. "One of them asked me if they did something wrong. They're 6 years old. They think the world listens when you raise
hand. But he didn't. The room fell silent except for Ethan's shallow breathing. When her call ended, Caprio closed his folder and looked directly at Ethan. "The issue here is not the amount of money you offered," he said. "It's what you believe that money could purchase. Silence, forgiveness, and exemption." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Everyone is acting like I committed a crime. I didn't hurt anyone. I didn't threaten anyone. Other people offer officers money all the time." Caprio slammed his hand lightly but sharply against the bench. "Other people are not under my judgment today. You are. And this court is not interested in what other people get away with. It is interested in what you did." Ethan sat back, defeated and uncertain, realizing that his father's office couldn't pull him out of this, that no crisp bills would quiet the consequences, and that the room he had walked into with entitlement was now closing in around him with truth. Caprio's gaze was unwavering. "Mr. Caldwell," he said, "finally, your name gave you confidence. But in this courtroom, your name gives you responsibility. And responsibility, unlike money, cannot be handed over. It must be earned." The shift was undeniable now. Ethan's smirk was gone. The illusion of inherited superiority had started to collapse. And as Judge Caprio prepared to move into the next phase, the confrontation of fact versus attitude, everyone watching knew that justice was about to begin shaping him in ways he had never been shaped before. Ethan tried to recompose himself, sitting straighter as though posture alone could rebuild the confidence that had been stripped away. But Judge Caprio was already lifting another set of documents, and the shift in his expression signaled that the real dismantling was about to begin. "Mr. Caldwell," the judge said, "a single mistake can be corrected with a fine. A repeated pattern requires something more." Ethan frowned, confused. What pattern? This was a one-off situation. Caprio tapped the papers. "Let's examine that claim." The judge read aloud from a previous report, an incident at a downtown restaurant where Ethan had bypassed the line, telling the host he didn't wait behind people who don't know who he is. Another incident at the airport where Ethan had raised his voice at a gate agent because he wasn't allowed into a VIP lane reserved for medical passengers. Then the school zone warning from a year ago. "None of these are criminal," Caprio clarified, "but they all reveal a consistent threat. You believe rules soften around you." Ethan rubbed his forehead, annoyed. "That's not true. People exaggerate because of my last name. They're waiting for me to mess up so they can make it dramatic." Caprio leaned forward. "Mr. Caldwell, entitlement is not measured by how you see yourself, but by how often your choices place others at risk. Today, those risks were 6-year-old children and a crossing guard who raised her hand to protect them." The judge folded his hands and locked eyes with Ethan. "Let's get to the most important part. His voice lowered into the tone he used when peeling away excuses, layer by layer. "I am going to ask you a series of questions. You will answer them with yes or no. Do you understand?" Ethan nodded reluctantly. "Good." Caprio held up the first page. "Did you offer Officer Diaz money during your traffic stop?" Ethan hesitated, searching for a loophole in phrasing. "I offered compensation for his time, not yes or no," Caprio interrupted. "Did you offer money?" Ethan swallowed. "Yes." The judge moved to the next. "Did you tell the officer your father would fix it?" Ethan inhaled sharply. "I said something like that, yes. So that's a yes." Caprio pressed. Ethan's jaw flexed. "Yes." The third question cut deeper. "Did you drive through an active school zone crosswalk while the crossing guard was signaling children across?" Ethan looked defeated now, the bravado stripped. "Yes." Caprio tapped his pen once. "And did you dismiss the danger by saying nobody was hit?" Ethan's eyes dropped to the table. "Yes." The judge raised one more page. Final question. "Did you imply that the officer's salary was too low to refuse your offer?" Ethan froze, then nodded almost imperceptibly. "Yes." The courtroom felt different now. The truth, forced into the open with no room for spin, hung over Ethan like weight he could finally feel. Caprio exhaled slowly. "Good. Now we can have an honest conversation." He took a moment before speaking again, letting the silence sculpt the seriousness of the moment. "Mr. Caldwell," he began, "what you did may not have injured anyone physically, but it injured the integrity of the process. A school zone is not just painted lines and blinking lights. It's a promise that children can cross safely because adults care enough to stop." Ethan opened his mouth to speak, but Caprio raised a hand. "Not yet." The judge turned to the court clerk. "Miss Rivera, please read the witness statement from Ms. Reynolds filed after her phone call." Rivera unfolded the paper and read. The crossing guard had written how the children asked her if they did something wrong because the car didn't stop. She described how that single moment brought back the memory of a child she saw almost die years earlier. She wrote that Ethan's car didn't just roll through, it came through with confidence. The kind of confidence that terrified her more than speed. Confidence, she wrote, that rules didn't apply to him. When the clerk finished, Ethan wiped his palms on his suit pants. "I didn't mean to scare anyone," he said quietly. "I didn't even see the kids. I was just—" Caprio cut him off, but not unkindly. "That's the problem, Mr. Caldwell. You weren't looking. You weren't listening. You weren't present. Arrogance makes you blind. And blind drivers in school zones are a danger to everyone." Ethan looked down, defeated. His voice was smaller now. "I didn't realize it looked like that." Caprio nodded. "That is the beginning of accountability." Then the judge leaned back, and the courtroom sensed a shift, not toward anger, but toward measured truth. "This is not about your father. It is not about politics. It is not about money. This is about responsibility and the danger of believing rules adjust to your privilege." Ethan opened his mouth again, voice trembling slightly. "Your Honor, I'm not a bad person. I just—" Caprio lifted a hand. "Mr. Caldwell, this is not about good or bad people. Good people make dangerous decisions when they believe consequences will bend for them. And dangerous decisions in a school zone can end lives." The judge paused again, eyes sharp but controlled. "Mr. Caldwell, responsibility is not inherited. Privilege is, and both can be lost." The words struck so deeply that Ethan's shoulders finally lowered. For the first time since walking into the courtroom, he didn't look like a senator's son or a young man playing at influence. He looked like someone finally realizing that a moment of arrogance had consequences, that money, names, or political offices could not buy away. And as Caprio prepared to deliver the next phase of the hearing, one that would determine not just punishment, but transformation,
The courtroom braced for what justice would look like for someone who had tried to purchase his way out of it. Judge Caprio adjusted his glasses, signaling that the tone of the hearing was about to shift again, not toward anger, but toward an unshakable seriousness reserved for rare moments when privilege meets its breaking point. Ethan sat stiffly, eyes lowered, hands clasped together so tightly that his knuckles had turned pale. The courtroom seemed to absorb the tension, quiet enough that even the softest breaths could be heard. "Mr. Caldwell," Caprio began, "I want to understand something clearly." His voice was deep, steady, deliberate, each word chosen with the precision of someone who had spent decades shaping justice with restraint. "After Officer Diaz refused your offer, you told him that your father takes care of people who take care of us. What exactly did you mean by that?" Ethan swallowed hard, the veneer of confidence wearing dangerously thin. "I meant he appreciates people who go out of their way to help the community. I wasn't threatening him." Caprio didn't blink. "Mr. Caldwell, Officer Diaz reported that your tone suggested the opposite of appreciation. It suggested expectation. It suggested influence. It suggested pressure." The judge leaned forward slightly. "Do you understand the difference between gratitude and coercion?" "Yes, Your Honor," Ethan whispered. "Do you?" Caprio asked again, sharper now. "Because coercion sounds like this: 'My father will take care of you if you make this ticket disappear.' Intent is irrelevant. Impact is what matters, and the impact here was unmistakable." Ethan's breath hitched. "I wasn't trying to bribe him." "That may be true in your mind," Caprio said calmly, "but your words and your timing created
The perception of bribery, a perception that corrodes trust in this system." The silence returned, heavy and uncomfortable. Then Caprio turned to the clerk. "Miss Rivera, please read the statement submitted by the school principal, Miss Carlo Bennett." Rivera opened another document and began. The principal described how 3 children cried after the incident because they thought the crossing guard didn't protect them well enough. She wrote about the psychological harm caused by near-miss incidents, how children remember the fear long before they understand the danger. She spoke of parents who trusted that school zones were sacred spaces protected by law and conscience. When the statement ended, Ethan looked physically smaller in his seat. Caprio took a breath. "Mr. Caldwell, you said earlier that you didn't see the kids. That is precisely why school zone laws are among the strictest on the books. They protect the people who cannot protect themselves." He lifted another paper. "And then we have the dashcam audio. Officer Diaz asked you if you understood why school zone speeding is treated differently. Do you recall your response?" Ethan looked confused. "I don't." "I'll remind you," Caprio said gently. He read directly. "Because politicians pretend it matters. Those were your words." Ethan's face drained of color. The judge continued. "School zone safety isn't a performance. It isn't political theater. It's the difference between life and death for a child who steps 1 foot too far." A murmur swept through the gallery. Anger, disbelief, judgment. But Caprio raised a hand. "Let us remain respectful. Justice requires clarity, not chaos." The room fell silent again. Caprio turned back to Ethan. "Mr. Caldwell, do you have anything to say about those recorded words?" Ethan's voice trembled. "I was frustrated, Your Honor. I didn't mean it like that. I wasn't thinking." "That," Caprio replied, "is precisely why your actions are so dangerous. Driving a vehicle near children requires thinking, requires awareness, requires respect." He set the paper down and exhaled slowly. "Now we arrive at the portion of this hearing that determines whether your lesson will be remembered tomorrow or forgotten tonight." Ethan looked up, eyes wide with fear. Caprio leaned back in his chair and studied him for several seconds. "I want to tell you a story, Mr. Caldwell." The courtroom shifted. Caprio rarely used personal anecdotes unless the moment demanded it. "Years ago, I handled a case involving a driver who rolled through a school zone crosswalk at 10 miles over the limit. Not 70 like you, 10. A child stepped into the street chasing a ball. The car missed him by half a second. The judge looked down, his voice soft but piercing. Half a second determined whether that child would go home to his mother." Ethan's lips parted slightly, breath shallow. Caprio continued, "That case stayed with me because the driver, just like you, thought the rules were flexible when he was in a hurry. That driver has spent a lifetime carrying the weight
Of a mistake that almost became a tragedy. The judge's eyes met Ethan's directly. "You didn't hurt anyone today, but you could have. And the only reason you didn't is because luck, not judgment," intervened. Ethan blinked rapidly, moisture forming in his eyes. Caprio tapped his pen once, measured. "Final. The question before this court now is not whether you are sorry. People are always sorry when they are caught. The question is whether you are capable of learning what your father's office cannot teach you. Humility." Ethan nodded slowly, his voice barely audible. "Yes, Your Honor." Caprio didn't answer immediately. He studied Ethan as though weighing not just a punishment, but a transformation. And when he finally leaned forward, voice low and resolute, the entire courtroom understood that justice was no longer something Ethan could buy, request, or imply. It was coming, measured, unshakable, unavoidable. Judge Caprio rested both hands on the bench, the quiet authority of decades settling over the room like a final curtain. Everyone sensed that the moment of judgment had arrived. Not rushed, not emotional, but deliberate and immovable. Ethan swallowed hard, bracing himself as though the wooden table before him were the only thing keeping him grounded. "Mr. Caldwell," Caprio began, voice steady but carrying a deeper weight. "You walked into this courtroom expecting a fine, perhaps a warning, perhaps a momentary inconvenience that your father's office could resolve. But justice is not a transaction. It is a transformation." Ethan's fingers tightened around the edge of the table. "Your Honor, I understand. I really do." Caprio raised a hand gently. "Let me finish." The judge lifted the original citation. "For speeding 74 miles per hour in an active school zone, I am imposing a fine of $6,500. Ethan inhaled sharply but didn't speak. For attempting to influence a law enforcement officer with money, an additional $5,000. Ethan blinked, stunned. For reckless endangerment of children, a charge that could have been far more severe had circumstances shifted by even a moment, I am adding $1,500. Ethan did quick mental math. $13,000. His lips parted, but no sound came out. Caprio folded his hands. "However, Mr. Caldwell, these fines are not the heart of your sentence. What comes next is—" Ethan leaned forward, dreading the words he knew were coming. "I am suspending your driving privileges for 18 months, Caprio said. Not because I want to punish you, but because you demonstrated that you cannot be trusted with the responsibility that driving demands." Ethan exhaled shakily, running a hand through his hair.
Your Honor, I commute to school. Caprio raised a finger. You will manage. The children you endangered would not have had the luxury of management. Ethan fell silent. Then Caprio lifted a second document, one that carried the weight of something far more personal.
Now, he said quietly, we must address the deeper harm. Your belief that rules bend for certain names, and that influence is a shortcut to accountability. Ethan closed his eyes, as if bracing for impact. You are ordered to complete 160 hours of community service, Caprio said, but not generic service. You will serve in the Providence Department of Child Safety and Crosswalk Assistance. Ethan's head shot up. Child safety? What would I be doing? Caprio didn't hesitate. Every morning, for 6 weeks, you will report at 6:30 a.m. to assist crossing guards throughout the district. Rain, snow, or sun, you will stand where they stand. You will hold the same stop sign they hold, and you will watch children cross the street with the trust you once shattered. A ripple of stunned whispers swept across the courtroom. Ethan's chest rose and fell rapidly. Your Honor, people will see me out there. Yes, Caprio replied. Visibility is part of accountability, the judge continued. In addition, you will attend 3 school assemblies where you will speak directly about the danger of reckless driving and the arrogance of believing rules don't apply to you. Students deserve to hear from someone who almost made an irreversible mistake. Ethan's throat tightened. Public speaking in front of teenagers? They're brutal. Caprio nodded. Perhaps hearing their reactions will teach you what humility truly feels like. The courtroom was silent, except for Ethan's uneven breathing. For the first time since entering the room, he wasn't posturing. He wasn't negotiating. He wasn't hiding behind his father's title. He was just a young man realizing that justice wasn't abstract. It was arriving, shaping him, whether he liked it or not. But Caprio wasn't finished. You will also complete a certified course on ethical decision-making and privilege misuse, the judge continued. Upon completion, you will submit a 2-page reflection to this court, explaining what you've learned. Ethan nodded slowly, eyes glossy but holding back tears. I will, Your Honor. I promise. And finally, Caprio said, you will record a 60-second public service announcement titled, When Rules Protect Children, No One is Above Them. It will be reviewed by the court before release. Ethan lowered his head into his hands, overwhelmed. Caprio allowed a quiet moment before speaking again, softer now. Mr. Caldwell, I do not take pleasure in assigning these tasks. My job is not to break you, it is to redirect you. Ethan lifted his head, eyes red. Your Honor, I'm sorry. I know everyone says that, but I genuinely mean it. I didn't realize how wrong it all looked, how dangerous it was, how arrogant I sounded. He swallowed hard. I embarrassed my father. I embarrassed myself.
And I frightened those kids, without even realizing it, Ethan whispered. Judge Caprio gave a slow, understanding nod. That, he said softly, is the first step toward maturity. He leaned forward, his tone firm but not harsh. Mr. Caldwell, privilege without accountability becomes poison. But privilege placed in the service of others, that is how communities are built. Your father chose a path of public service. Today marks the start of your own journey toward earning the right to walk behind his name. Ethan swallowed hard, his voice trembling as he spoke. Thank you, Your Honor. for teaching me instead of tearing me down. Judge Caprio gently closed the case folder. This hearing is adjourned. As the bailiff moved in, Ethan stood, not with the swagger he entered with, but with a quiet humility that made him almost unrecognizable. For the first time, he understood that justice isn't about escaping consequences. It's about who you choose to become after facing them. Judge Caprio had done what he'd done for decades, turned a courtroom into a classroom, and turned a mistake into a moment of transformation. That legacy, justice with compassion, continues to outlive every case he ever presided over. Before you go, make sure you subscribe to Case Closed so you never miss stories like this. Stories where justice isn't just served, it changes lives.